Alright, so in this video we're going to be looking at some techniques to edit individual sounds to make them more interesting. So I'm going to do two different sounds. I'm going to do one sound, the running water, which is more continuous. And then the other one I'll do is the bell sound, which is more of a isolated or single sound with a defined attack. Okay, and so this part of the project is quite important because this is where you're going to make the sounds your own. You're going to make them more interesting and you're going to demonstrate your knowledge of some different techniques. So one of the easiest ways to make a sound like this one more interesting is to add some layers. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the end of the sound, and then I'm going to go to the effect and hit fade out, and that will just give it a smooth fade out, which will make it just nicer, so we won't have an abrupt ending there. But then the next thing I'm going to do, so this is where I'm going to start building up the layers, so I'm just going to copy that whole thing and I'm going to paste it, let's say twice. And so now what I can do is I can edit the individual tracks here by putting effects on them, and then adjust the levels of those tracks so I get 3 different layers of sound. So on the first one, I'm going to go up to my effects, and there's a whole bunch of different things I can do. So one of the things I can do is change the speed. Now if I hit change speed, as I slow it down, the pitch will become lower, and as I speed it up, the pitch will become higher. So let's make it faster first of all. So you can see that'll also make the sound shorter. Now I'm just going to hit the solo button there so I only hear that one. And we'll have a listen now. And as you can hear, the pitch of that sound's become quite a bit higher. I'm just going to undo that for now. If I want to change the speed without changing the pitch, I have to use the change tempo option. Likewise, if I want to change the pitch without changing the speed, I've got to use the change pitch. But I'm not going to do any of those for now. I'm going to use what's called the EQ first of all. So if I hit EQ, I get something that looks like this. And on this screen here, this little pop-up, what these sliders represent are different pitch ranges in that sound. So if I have the ones at the bottom all the way up, or on the left-hand side, I should say, what that's going to do is make the low pitches louder. And then I'm going to get rid of all the high pitches. Let's have that all the way, like so. And we'll see what I have now. So that's quite a lower pitch now. You can see the volumes come down a bit. I can fix that later. So I'm also going to add some reverb. So reverb is like an echo. So I can make my room size bigger. Stand that up. You can see that's made it a little bit louder. Let's have a listen now. Okay, so that's starting to sound a bit more interesting. Now I'm going to reverse that so it plays backwards. Which doesn't make a huge difference in this case, because it's a fairly continuous sound. And I think for now that's going to be enough. So I'm going to amplify that to make it a bit louder. And I'm just going to add a fade in at the start to make that beginning a bit less abrupt. Oops, I had the wrong part selected there. So there we go, fade in. Just going to redo that fade out. And so that I'm going to have as my second layer. Now for my third one, I think I want to play with the pitch a bit here. So this one I want to make even lower. So I'm going to change pitch. And there's different ways you can do this, but you can just use this slider here. So I'm going to make my pitch go way down. Let's go, maybe not that much. Let's try this. I'll hit the solo button so I can just hear that. And I quite like that, so I'm going to keep it like that. But again, I'm going to make it a little bit louder. Select that track. And I'm going to put some reverb on that too. And some distortion as well. Oh, so that's gone a bit too loud there. So I'll just undo that. Let's take the volume down a bit. Let's try that out now. Effect. And now I'm going to add the distortion. So that sound is just an issue with my interface. That's not actually part of it. You can see I'm quite happy with that. So that's now a much more interesting sound than what I had to start with. Just fix that fade out. So now if I turn that off, now I'm going to play all three at once and see what it sounds like with all my layers happening at the same time. Alright, so there's quite a lot going on there. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this one a little bit louder, first of all. And I want the different layers to be more prominent at different times. So I'm going to make this fade in over about half the track. And then fade out from the second half. And as it fades out, I'm going to bring this one in more. So I'm going to add a slow fade on that. And then a fade out. And this one I'm going to get to fade in almost all the way to the end, so it becomes more prominent near the end. So you can see the three different layers become more prominent at different times. Let's see what we have now. Okay, so I've got a much more interesting sound there now. So I could save that as my version of the water sound. So I'm going to call that running water layers. And now that is the sound that I'll use as part of my track, my final project. All right, now I'm going to do something similar with the bell sound. So the bell is not a continuous sound. It's a shorter sound with an attack. So let's have a listen. So first of all, I've got a little sound on the end there that I don't want. So I'm just going to delete that. And now I can see the end looks like it's a bit abrupt. Yeah, it kind of cuts off there. So I just want to fade that out. Okay. Now I'll get rid of that bit of silence at the start because we don't really need that. Doesn't matter if there's a little bit there. And then first thing, I actually want to try hearing this a lot slower and lower because I think that might sound cool. So let's take it down to like a quarter of the speed and see what we get. Yeah, I quite like that. And then that ambience we get is quite nice after the initial attack, that ringing. So So I think what I want to do is, let's get rid of that silence at the end. I'm going to select about this much and repeat just once. And now what I'm going to do is spin this around. So I'm going to reverse that. So it's going to fade away after the bell's rung, but then it's going to start coming back. Is the idea. Let's see how well it works. Okay, so it worked reasonably well. I think I want to maybe amplify the whole thing a little bit so it doesn't fade all the way out in the middle there. Okay, now the trick is if I'm going to be able to do it again, which may not work. So I'm going to want to select about there. Find my repeat button, there it is. And then reverse that. Let's see what I get. So that actually worked reasonably well. And I might put a little bit of reverb on that whole thing. See what that does. Okay, so I'm reasonably happy with that. Now I've just remembered that I wanted to use the original bell sound for something else. So the way I can get back to that without getting rid of what I've done here is I'm just going to copy this to a new project. And I'm going to go back to the one I was just in and just hit Control Z until I get back to the original bell. There it is. And I'm going to copy that into my new project. Now, up until now, you've only seen me using this selector tool up here. So to move this track here, this one, because I want it to come in later, I'm going to just use this tool here, time shift, and I can just click and drag it along. And I want that to come in, yeah, around there. And for this one, I actually want to make this go a lot faster. I'm going to get rid of the silence on the end there. Select it. And again, I'm going to use the change speed because I do want to change the pitch here. So I'm going to double that at least. See what that gives me. Maybe again. Let's try it again. I think I'll go with the second one. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat that several times. Say 16. And I'm going to copy and paste it into another track, which I'm going to time shift so they match up. There we go. And now what I want to do is take the second one, and I'm going to do a couple of things here. First of all, I'm going to change the pitch. So I don't want to change the speed yet, I just want to change the pitch. So this time, rather than using the slider, going to choose how much it changes in semitones, which is a type of musical interval. We'll talk about those later in the subject. All right, so I've done that. Now let's see what I've got. Okay, that's more or less what I wanted, but I actually want the effect where they're not happening at exactly the same speed. A bit like the sound of a railway crossing. So now it's already at the pitch I want, so I don't want to change the speed because that's going to affect the pitch too, so I need to use change tempo. So let's go 20%. And now let's see what we get. Okay, and that's going to be my bell sound. So let's just review what I have there. So I have the original bell sound, which I've slowed down and added reverb to, and then extended it by repeating this ambience towards the end. And then I've sped it up and pitch shifted it and slightly altered the speed of one layer to create this sort of railway crossing effect, which is happening over the top of that ambience. Having a bit of an audio issue there. Okay, so that's how you can use the effects in Audacity to make your sounds more original and interesting. And that's the type of thing you'll want to do before you import them into your final project.